You ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, I'm good when you are.
All right. Well, I mean, it's been a long time since I've done an episode. I've had a lot of things just like going on in my life, and I'm just gonna get this out of the way right away and say, like, if you do a podcast, it's basically like taking on another full-time job. There's a real reason why people have producers. But we start it the same way every single time. Now that I got my little spiel out of the way, uh, tell the people who you are and what you do.
My name's Marratto. I'm a visual artist is like the easiest way to describe what I do, but I also work in concert promotion and live music. And my big project coming up, the main reason I wanted to hop on here and talk to you is I'm doing a skateboard release, skate deck art. Which you could see a few behind me, but
Are those for the show?
Yeah, all of them except one will be part of the show. There's also like 15 to 20 more.
Right on. Well, I mean, we weren't going to bury the lead anyway, so you kind of already jumped into it. Let's hear it. What are all the details?
The show itself is this Saturday at Redfish Bowl in Lawrenceville,
which is the 20th, right? November 20th.
Yeah, this Saturday, November 20th. At Redfish Bowl, we have Chalk Dino doing a DJ set, which we just announced today, and I'm super pumped about. He's going to be performing the following weekend at the Thunderbird, so we kind of worked with them to get him to do a DJ set, promote their show a little bit in return, you know.
Right on. So what's the occasion? What would, like, now that we kind of have like that top level announcement out there, like what you just kind of gave people like what they can expect, but like what won't they be expecting when they get there? And like, why is this really exciting for you? Like, what about this show like has you really excited that you're going to finally do this?
I mean, the biggest thing is just, this has been a personal mission of mine for years. I've wanted to do this since we knew each other when we were kids. And I dabbled in it over the years. I made a few decks in college with a buddy of mine, but I didn't do it properly. So it's always been this project sort of sitting on the back burner, and I finally just wanted to pull the trigger on it. And I think what prompted me to do that, and the reason that I titled the show Skate or Die, is because I don't know, we're both eking towards middle age now, and I had this, this thing that sort of skateboard connects me to my youth, you know what I mean? And it's not like I saw a quote on a cheesy, Facebook skateboard group for old guys that was said like, you don't stop skating because you get old. You get old because you stop skating. You know what I mean? And it kind of prompted me to really start getting into it again and finally make this project happen.
Yeah, so, and I kind of I wanted to get into that a little bit too, like the whole concept of just like, well, I mean, you said in your announcement that you've been wanting to do this since you were at least in high school. And and it just kind of like made me think like, all right, we're butt up against our 40s. And, so that's a good, you're talking about 20 some years. What, like, I guess it had me thinking about like communities and what like kind of keeps you attached to something for so long, because on like a weird kind of almost cliche tip, I've been really paying attention to NFTs and just like this whole thing. I just want to understand what's happening, and it's wild, but like there's this intersect that's happening with like trends and communities, and like and I'm seeing all these people that are kind of like involving themselves in it, but then also people who have always been kind of waiting for this type of thing to take place so that they could be involved in it. And I feel like there's like a couple buckets that people like exist in. And one is like they admire from a distance and have like this casual appreciation for something they think is cool. And then the other is there's like they see an opportunity. Somehow there's like an opportunity to be like, taken advantage of, and or they're just personally invested in the actual underlying community that comes along with whatever that thing is. So like, what is it about skating, and what is it about like that community that's like kept you so involved in it and so passionate about it for all this, like this entire time?
I mean, definitely, it all kind of comes back to the sort of DIY ethos from our, punk rock skateboarding youth. That was, excuse me, that was instilled so hard that it informed the way that I've done everything for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? So like, it's so ingrained in my thinking that there was no way not to stay involved with it, even though I don't skate nearly as much as I did, and when I do, I like old man skate now. You know what I mean? I'm not going off the ground at all. So like, I don't know, I'm not an amazing skateboarder, but just something about that DIY ethos has always resonated with me. And from the concert side of things, live music, to solo art shows and all of it, all the underlying theme amongst all of it is like, do it yourself, get up and go, don't wait for somebody else. And that's embedded in skateboarding.
Right. Well, and then kind of to exactly what you're saying, like one of the things that I realized is like there are so many aspects that make up a community. And you touched on it right away when you basically said like the DIY thing, which is basically like the valued skill sets that like exist in a community, but they have their own culture, they have their own language, they have their own fashion. Like, when I think of skateboarding, I think of DC shoes. When I think of valued skill sets, like obviously like there's like some athleticism and like balance involved, but also like, like just being able to like work with your hands. You have a physical thing that you need to take care of: wheels, trucks, boards. There's just, so that you kind of you got my like wheels spinning into like the skateboarding community as soon as, oh yeah, pun not intended, but God, that worked. As soon as you said that we should do an episode, I really started like digging back into that concept of skateboarding and like coming to that realization that it's got a long history. Like I've known about skateboarding since I was little, and it was because like my next door neighbors were always skating.
And when you and I were teenagers, that was sort of like the resurgence of it, because it did pretty much die for a while when we were super young, or right before we were born. It did kind of die off from its like peak in the late 70s into the early 80s. So we were kind of right on that second wave, like Tony Hawk generation or whatever, just thinking about how it all connected, like you and I met through shows that were as DIY as they could possibly be, what I mean? And like that sort of spirit definitely carried over into the way I approach live music as an adult. And I think it's just like, I don't know, it's such a real community when there's people actually like, again, not waiting for somebody else to do it, not waiting for the corporate giant to book the bands or whatever, just get up and go. I've always loved it,
Well, I guess like
skating.
Say again.
I said, and it permeates into skating. I mean, that whole skate and live music culture, they were one and the same to me, and to a lot of people, obviously. How many bands got launched by Tony Hawk Pro Skater? How many older bands had like a second wave of new fans from Tony Hawk Pro Skater? Like a bunch of 14-year-old kids found out who the Dead Kennedys were. You know what I mean? Like that's amazing.
And that's kind of funny that you brought that up, because I do remember like all those games, like Tony Hawk, like Cool Borders, just like the X Games game in general, like all their soundtracks like stopped just being like those little like 8-bit whatever, like boop 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 boop, and it was like real songs and real bands and like
and actual songs and bands that that actual skateboarders would listen to. It made it really authentic, and gave those bands a platform that they never would have had otherwise. You know what I mean? It was like especially like Goldfinger, they're like a ska band. They're like, a subgenre of a subgenre, and one that was never taken very seriously at that. But I mean, they had a career because of their song being on that video game. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, so like the craziest thing for me, and I'm actually just realizing this in this moment, that I like my favorite MXPX song I heard from one of those games. It was Party at My House, Be There. And then fast forward like 10, 15 years or however long it took, then I ended up being on tour with them.
Yeah.
Like how
moments like that too. With like the very first band that I ever saw in a club, which was Club Laga, was Suicide Machines with Anti-Flag. And then years later, working at the Rex, there was a moment where we had booked both of those bands, and I was, walking through the green room, seeing them in there, and just thinking, like, man, 15-year-old me would be so pumped right now. It felt like very full circle, and like I had actually accomplished something, at least something that teenage Pierce would be proud of,
Yeah,
and that's important, I think,
Yeah, absolutely. And I like, it's one of those things where like I look back and like I think there's definitely some things that I'm doing right now that my younger self would be like, all right, cool. But like I always like hoped that I would grow older and look back at younger me and go like, oh, please don't be embarrassed by everything you did back in like in your history. But like I could never take back those, especially those years in the music, like meeting you, like you were, I think, a part of my first show that I ever played.
And it was definitely my second or third, something like that, when you and I met, and when we met Christmas Egger and Kevin Safner and all these people that I would end up like working together with well into my 30s. You know what I mean? It's crazy. And really cool. I mean, especially since I left and came back for a while, to be able to like reconnect with those people like I had never left. Like I didn't spend 6 years in another state,
Right.
As soon as I came back, everyone was like, all right, well, we're doing stuff. What do you want to be? How do you want to fit into this? It felt good.
We're definitely going to get to that.
Those people. Yeah.
We're gonna circle around to that for sure. So I don't know. Did we mention that you're going to do this at Red Fishbowl?
I did, I believe. Right. Yeah. Red Fishbowl in Lawrenceville this Saturday, November 20th.
Yeah. So I've heard you mention Red Fishbowl to me like a number of times, and kind of like, so over the past couple years, I've started getting like really into comedy, and I'm listening to all these podcasts, and they talk about like what it is that makes the venue that they chose really special to do their special, the thing that'll be on Netflix or the thing that they're going to release on YouTube or whatever. So like for people who may not know much about Red Fishbowl yet, like tell me about Red Fishbowl and your relationship with them, and like what should people know about them that you value, and like that, why did that compel you to hold your show there?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why definitely comes directly back to the sort of DIY thing, because that's essentially what it is it's a co-op space for artists. There's actual individual studios that artists can rent out, and then there's a group workspace that people can come whenever they want and work on their art. And then there's also gallery space, obviously. And yeah, I mean, it's super DIY. It's not a hoity-toity art gallery with white walls and white wine. There might be white wine, but it's definitely not like an average art gallery. Like the things that I've always been attracted to are those that like sort of outlier, not necessarily outlier, but sort of the people that don't have their nose in the air, I guess. And I am one of the artists. That's how I'm connected. But also, Chris the guy that runs Red Fish Bowl, also does some event stuff, and he and I met through that. He knew that I worked at the Rex and had experience with events, so he would hire me to do, help him out with stage managing and stuff like that. I don't know. He's a bit of a madman, but like a lovable madman, and he gets it done. And I've always appreciated that about him. So like when it came time to do a show, it just seemed like that was the natural fit for it, and right. The location good, and it's right in the heart of Lawrenceville, so people can hit it on their way to other things. You know what I mean? It's not like you're gonna have to drive out and be stuck out there. You know what I mean? So yeah, things like that, location and whatever, that all works out too. But
right. And the funny part is, like, I remember the first time you actually brought it up to me, and then I went to Lawrenceville, I think like 2 weeks later or something like that, just to hang out. And I'd walked by that stretch a million different times, but it wasn't until you mentioned it that like, oh, that's the place. Like, I just never even, like, yeah. I don't know.
And when that space first opened, there was not much signage or anything out front, but he's now got like the door hand painted. It's super cool. There's like always a mannequin outside, this painted up mannequin with like a display board and like a little bit of music playing to try to draw people in, because it is easy to miss, but it is also an awesome space. There's a ton of room for artists, like I said, individual studios for people, as well as a big group workspace, and, just a space where people can get together and make art around other people. Cause like sometimes, creative passions can be lonely, you know what I mean? So to be able to just, even if you're not working with somebody, just to be like in the same room as somebody else working can be hugely helpful sometimes. So, yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have that space,
For sure. And you actually like helped me segue really easily into like what I want to talk to you next about, because like I have artistic ability. I went to school. I have a minor in studio art, but what I don't have is, I guess there's just like, I'm missing something that like brings up the subject matter that I really want to keep creating around. And, I guess like, I've definitely talked about this on the podcast before. And, like I have a bunch of your art on my walls. Like it's, and it's all different. And that's like very like evident in the pieces that I've acquired over time with you, that like, there's been like an evolution of the style. But like, what is it like? What is the subject matter that like excites you? And like, what is it that fuels the desire to put so much like concentration, effort, time, and creativity into a single piece, then find the drive to do it all over again? Like, where do you find that kind of inspiration in the world?
I mean, it's like a bit of just like an instinct that like, I don't even know if instinct is the right word. I just feel like a compulsion to do it. Sort of, I don't know, like a lot of people, the creative outlet is exactly that. It's an outlet, it could help with mental health issues or whatever, there's a million things. So like, sometimes it's to like exercise some demons, but I made a point when I was younger to like not rely on misery to make good art, because that's a really dangerous trap that a lot of artists fall into. And like, yes, a lot of the best art that I've ever made was when I was depressed, or when I wasn't in a generally good spot. But I knew that if that was the only way I was ever going to be able to be creative or to make good stuff, I would be burnt out and dead by 40. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to do this stuff for a while still, so I had to like train myself to be able to also make good work when I'm happy, so, and I feel like I've kind of gotten there in some ways, but yeah, I don't know. It tends to be a little bit more dialed in and not as like gesturally, like the actual artwork itself, a little bit tighter when I'm not as, angry or depressed or whatever it is. But even that I'm trying to train myself out of, like to be able to get like aggressive with a painting and slap some paint around and get tactile with it, but not because I'm mad. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's because I'm having a good day, you know?
Right. Yeah. Intentionally making a mess.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
like I guess like a concentrated mess or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know exactly what I'm saying, but what about the
Well,
subject
there's
matter
a history.
portion?
What's that?
What about like the subject matter portion of it? Like, what about the things like, are there just things that you naturally gravitate to that you just like to create and recreate?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely themes like throughout a lot of my stuff. I love drawing plants and flowers and stuff like that. So you'll notice most of the posters and like album covers and stuff like that that I've done in my life include some sort of, you know, flora in them. But I also really love like kind of sea creatures and stuff like that. Obviously, like I have jellyfish tattooed on me, and that's in my logo that I use. So like sea creatures also. But as far as like what sort of themes I go after, it's definitely things more on like the ethereal side, like things that are like, I guess you can call it surreal, but not exactly like Salvador Dali, you know.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. A lot of it I like to make in a way that's vague enough that sometimes I don't even know what I mean by it. And it'll be like years later that I see a piece and I'm like, oh God, that's what was going on in your head at the time, you know? Or I've had people like point it out to me, like tell me what a piece means to them. And I'm like, oh my God, you're absolutely right. I didn't even know that though.
Right.
And that's pretty interesting. So like there's that sort of like ethereal vagueness that I like to play with. That's where I find, you know, most of the most interesting stuff that I do for sure.
And like I said, you've done a lot of different styles, and I've seen you just engage in art in so many different ways. Like we met doing music, so obviously, you know, music.
Mm-hmm.
And then before I even realized that you had like a truly like hands-on artistic artistic ability, you were always into you know, like video and photography. So like
Yeah.
you always had that visual eye, and then, you know, and how that translates to like, you know, digital and editing and whatnot. And then you really started leaning into like this art side of you a little bit later on than when, like, probably, I don't know. I mean, it was significantly later after I met you that you
Yeah.
really started leaning into all this. But like
For
I've
sure.
seen
Yeah.
you paint, and then I've seen you do things like you know, like fine tip, you know, ink pen and whatnot. Like
Mm-hmm.
what is there any particular style that like you enjoy the most, or is it just like you just kind of it's kind of like traveling, like you want to visit something and then maybe revisit it later?
Yeah, a little bit of that for sure. But like the way that I progressed through some of those creative mediums, like with music, for instance, I hit a point with music where I realized that like I wasn't nearly as good as a lot of the other people that I was with. You know what I mean? The people that I was playing with or hanging out with, and other bands that we were playing with. So it's sort of, there was a moment where like I realized I could either drop music entirely and just devote myself wholly to visual mediums because I was already pretty good at that, or I could just kind of like dabble and be mediocre at both. So I sort of decided to just cut out playing music entirely. Still staying involved in music, obviously, through you know, live music and concert promotion and whatnot. But then, like you said, I got into photography and video and stuff. And all the while, though, I was a painter, and I grew up in like the AP art classes and that sort of thing. So I was always into just more like traditional hands-on medium. But the photography thing when I was in school and a little bit after, but I feel like photo got to a really weird place where, you know, I wasn't competing with professionals anymore. I was competing with amateurs, and that was maddening. You know?
Right.
Um, and that's only gotten worse. So like I still enjoy photo, but in a way more distant sort of way now. And so like you said, it was probably like mid to late 20s that I really dove back into doing more, visual media like that. Got away from photography, started doing concert posters, and the 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 scene that I was starting to become involved in with like the jammier side of things, there was like this history of amazing poster art. So once I sort of found that, it was full speed ahead. Like I want to do a lot of that.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is a lot of digital work though. So, I need to get my hands dirty sometimes. So I still paint, and even the skateboards. Some of the skateboards for the show are hand shaped, or it's all something that I made top to bottom. Some of them are just I bought blanks and put artwork on them. But so yeah, I don't know. There has to be the balance. Like I love digital technology and all that I can do with it, but I have to paint, or else I just I'm gonna go crazy eventually, and I'll burn out on doing the digital work. So it sort of like helps me stay even keeled. Yeah, I don't know if that really answered your question. I think so.
No,
but
it does. And I can actually identify with how you were saying, like, if you keep doing too much of the digital, you'll just burn out without doing a little bit of the physical, because I'm not the type of person that like experiences like I don't know if it was a depression, but it was definitely like a funk. It was definitely I just felt stuck. I was like just 0% creative, and I couldn't really like work my way out of it. And it was last February, and I've never painted before. I used to draw a lot, but like I never actually tried painting. And I was like, screw it. My sister a couple years back had bought me a couple canvases that I was going to use for something else, but I'd never used them. And I was like, yeah, screw it. I'm going to paint. And I remember just really enjoying it. I remember being like putting on a bunch of podcasts, putting on a bunch of music, and just really enjoying it. And then I felt as I was getting to like the end of it, because I bit off way more than I could chew. I should have done just one panel, and then I did like a 4-panel single piece, and I was like, what am I doing?
I've head first into the deep end, man. I love it.
Yeah. So, but it really, like, I still was able to do it. I still was able to get it done. And by the end of it, though, I felt really good, or at least a lot better than I was feeling. And I felt, I knew that I wanted to get back to doing things like this, doing the podcast and things. But I had no drive for it. I didn't really feel like having conversations. And if I had a conversation before, so I probably wouldn't be that interested, or I wouldn't have anything to say. And yeah, there was just something about me dabbling in something that I literally don't do often at all, and used to enjoy way back when, that kind of like recharge that battery. It was like a small vacation of everything that I think is normal. And it got me back into feeling creative again. So I totally understand.
There's something so zen about just pushing paint around on a surface. It's insane. And I don't know what exactly about that is so satisfying. But like, even if you're not making, a beautiful painting that you think is going to be hung in the Louvre someday, like just pushing paint around on a canvas, or even on a wall. Painting walls can be like that. Like to just sort of check out of your head and do this thing. And I think it's something like with I don't know, like the same sort of thing that makes like shoveling snow satisfying, to see a job completed. So like, I don't know, there's something about it that just I think is good for you, even if it's not a masterpiece, whatever. But in general, just to like, I don't know, throw something new into like the creative process. Even like sometimes when I get stuck, I even will just like buy a new kind of brush that I've never used before, or download a new like typeface to use on my posters, and all of a sudden that can just like fire off so many things,
Right.
but yeah, last February was rough for me too, though. It was like, trying to be creative during the pandemic was a mega challenge for a lot of people, I think. But yeah, I don't know. Coming out on, well, I don't know if I could say coming out on the other end of it because we're not yet, but just knowing there was some hope on the horizon definitely helped me to get going again and to finish these skateboards off. So,
well,
yeah.
you're doing really good at helping me segue into things that I want to talk about, because before I move on to like asking about your full story, I would feel just derelict of duty to not like shine a light on these last 2 years and like the monumental shifts that have happened in your life professionally. So tell us about all of that, and then where everything you're working on stands right now.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously working in the live music industry, like that, we were one of the first to shut down. We started canceling shows, I think the first week of March, and on my birthday, March 12th, was like really when it hit the fan hard, and that I spent the entire day canceling and refunding shows. It was not the most fun birthday.
Do you mean the Rex or just gray area in general?
The Rex and some of our other shows too. We were also working at the Roxy and doing a lot of the marketing. Fortunately for me, unfortunately for my buddy Alex, we weren't doing the ticketing for those shows though. So like I didn't have to actually deal with the cancellations and refunds as much, other than like announcing it on socials and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, all of our shows at the Rex, all of the rentals at the Rex, like, because we did ticketing for a lot of the rentals too, even if it wasn't our show. So yeah, it was like a full day plus, here and there. Because at that point, we still thought some of these shows might happen. And, so it went on for a couple months until in, I think it was July or so, we got word that the Rex wasn't going to survive the pandemic. And man, that was devastating. I'm not even going to lie. Like that place was, I don't know, it was such a home for so many people. And like, when I say home, I mean that. Like people felt like they were part of it, and they were, and it was just a really amazing place. And yeah, man, that was one of, when the Rex closed, it seriously like felt like losing a friend, and but yeah, we like went down there and spent a week taking all the stuff out of it and, cleaning up a little bit and all that kind of stuff. And I just, last time I left there, dude, I sat up on the balcony and cried like a baby for like an hour and just was like, felt devastated. But shortly after that, I fell into this other live music industry gig through a venue in Florida called the Funky Biscuit. It's in South Florida. And like I had been chatting with the owner a little bit about doing some work with them. And then once the Rex closed, I reached out and just said like, hey man, if you still need help with anything, I'm game. You know what I mean? So then I ended up flying down, meeting him and checking out the venue. And he not only hired me on, but hired my friend Rich, who was my like partner in crime on all things marketing for the Rex and Gray area. He hired both of us. And this was still, it was Florida. So they were able to have music,
right,
back when the pandemic was still kind of raging. So to get me and him hired on at this venue, like in the midst of the pandemic, was just like shocking. I could have never, asked for that to happen, expected that to happen. It was basically like right when I needed it to, so then we're obviously doing all that from Pittsburgh. So there's a bit of a disconnect. And, you don't feel quite as wrapped up in it, but we flew down there for in July for the 10-year anniversary party. And I don't know, spending the whole weekend there, it hit me like, man, the vibe of this place is exactly what we had, at the Rex. And the fact that I sort of blindly stumbled into it was just shocking. Like there really is the same like family vibe amongst the people that work there. They all feel so committed and they're all part of it. and the music's good, and like, it's owned and run by music nerds, which is exactly what we had. And a venue like that is so much different than a venue that's corporate. You know what I mean? There's just, to be blunt about it, like I couldn't have asked for a cooler venue to have stumbled into after losing the Rex. It really was pretty awesome. And I felt incredibly lucky and fortunate. Beyond that, I'm still doing a little bit of stuff here. I'm trying to maybe, throw a show or two of my own outside of just artwork, and because I just want to be involved locally again. Still, I love it here. The team took a pretty big hit, not just the Rex. A lot of cool things, awesome bands and cool venues. Like a lot of them didn't make it, and it sucks, And I feel like I don't know, a sort of sense of duty to do my part to help revive it. And we both saw it. Pittsburgh's music scene, we saw it die when we were younger, and it was awful for a while. And then all these things like conspired, and all these people started moving back, or just moving there for the first time, and cool bands. And it was just like, it was a really vibrant, awesome scene for a while. And we unfortunately lost a lot of it, but knowing that it's gone and come back and gone and come back gives me hope that we can bring it back. So I just want to kind of do my bit to help that happen.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, we definitely saw. I thought it was like one of the best scenes. Whenever that Laga era was just just untouchable. And I mean, I would still say that it's not still as like unified, but maybe I'm just like beyond it, and I'm old in that sense, because like maybe these kids have a better like have a better community with like underneath me that I'm not aware of. But I try to keep my ear to the ground. But yeah, I mean, there's a resilience about. I mean, there's a resilience about Pittsburgh, not even about just like the scene, but like there's always something. Pittsburgh always finds a way to bounce back. We're supposed to be, we're named the Steel City, but like we basically don't really have much going on in that realm anymore.
Not really much at all.
Yeah, we adapt and redefine ourselves and grow into something else. So yeah, in the sense that you're talking. Yeah, I have all the faith in the world that something will come up in its place. I guess it's kind of like that thing, like when like an authority goes away, there's a power vacuum, and something, it's the availability of something to move up into its place.
Yeah. And I mean, after Laga shut down, and a couple other venues shut down around that same time too. And that's when we had that sort of just like awful drought for a while. But I was gone for most of that. I was living in Florida at the time. And then like when I came back, my plan was never to stay here. Like, my plan was to sleep on my parents' couch for a couple weeks and save some money, and then be on my way to another big city. But I sort of fell in love with it all over again. And it was right around that time that like the Rex reopened, and then shortly after James Street reopened, and like it was a really incredible scene. And again, we lost some of that. James Street is coming back though, which is nice. It's different ownership, but still good to hear that there's going to be another music venue back in the city that's independently run by music people.
Right.
That's always nice to see. So a lot of the pieces that made the scene what it was are still here, even if some of like, the hubs might be not there anymore, but the potential still is. So I definitely have hope. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so now that we've kind of covered your more recent history, we're gonna go all the way back, because this is kind of like my favorite part of the podcast, and I love that I had the opportunity to build this thing that is kind of just like it's really just like a selfish, like hedonist type of a a deal. Like I just get to have conversations and then lead people into telling me the story that I really want to hear. Uh, and but like I'm excited about this because like obviously there's a portion of your history where like I'm riding along in parallel with you. You know, I've seen, you know, I've been around with you for so long, but you know, we always end up having our little offshoots in life and are doing our own things, but we're always
Yeah,
still kind of around. But I love the idea that I get to ask you to kind of give me like the granular look of like what you consider to be your like professional journey as a creative and just somebody that, you know, or just as a professional. It doesn't even need to be as a creative, but like I don't know, like pick where you think like is like the true beginning of that journey and kind of bring me up to how like bring me up to how like you are now to like where you've arrived in this moment and like those milestones, the really hard decisions you've had to make, the risks you've had to take, the struggles, like, and that's those, because what I like about this is twofold. A lot of the times we don't get to talk about these things. You know, we
yeah,
kind of gloss over them and like, you know, we just kind of enjoy the time we have with each other. But the other side of the coin is, you know, when people see people that have experienced success or on a path to like a visible path to success, they don't see all that other stuff. And I think that that's like the most important part, is to like let them know that like it wasn't that you woke up one morning and like everything was great. Like the amount of shit that you have to
far.
eat to get to that point is immense, and that should be appreciated. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
funny that you
wherever.
mentioned that. Before I get into my personal stuff, though, I just got a quick story. So I have given a few talks to kids at like, I don't know, in schools, and one was at like an after school program or something where it's like a career day type of thing. And I'm there as like the artist, you know? And every time that I've done it, it's like, it's always been in a way where like the kids get to choose. And when I say kids, it's usually more like teenagers, like 12 to 16 years old, so they're a little bit older, and they're choosing to be in this. Is like, what, you know, what do you want to do when you grow up? And some of them pick artists. So like I, in those situations, generally put the fear of God into them. Because like I I did have a few, you know, teachers and people that I looked up to growing up that warned me about how incredibly difficult it is to be a creative person and to make a living and to not go insane. But even then, I like didn't really respect those warnings as much as I, you know, come to realize that I should have. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny that you mentioned that though, because it
Yeah,
does. You definitely do have to respect that side of it, and most people don't see it.
so as a kid who decided to disregard the warning that your teachers gave you, yeah, what do you see is like, what do you see is like your where did your journey start, and where were like the major moments, you know, positive, negative, that brought you to the point you're at? Because obviously
Yeah,
like you stuck with it, you're still in it, you're still plowing forward with it. So like I just love hearing that story.
yeah. I mean, as far as like, I don't know how I got into. I mean, art was from day one. I don't really know if I could have a starting point to when I started, you know, drawing or whatever. That was really like something that was not pushed on me in like a negative way, but like when I would be babysat at my grandma's house, I would always like, they would stick a stack of paper in front of me and pencils and just go nuts for hours. You know what I mean? So like, there's not really a starting point for that, but I definitely fell in love with music, you know, in my very early teenage years, maybe like, I don't know, even before that, in like the 10 to 11 range is when I really started to take music seriously. And then that show that I mentioned earlier at Club Laga, that was the first time I'd seen music in a club setting, because I had been to Warped Tour, and that already kind of, it was like Warped Tour 1996. That's going to date me a little bit. But that was definitely in itself a turning point. But I remember that show at Laga even more so, specifically just like having that feeling of like, this is where you need to be. Like, these are your people here, you know? So like, that would be a big turning point. Around that time, on the more negative end of things, my father passed away, and that was definitely super formative too. He died of ALS, so like he had been sick my entire life basically. So I had a lot of time to get ready for it, but still something happens whenever you watch your father pass away that like really either can kind of destroy you or they kick you into gear sort of. And that was a moment for me where I remember distinctly thinking like, this is a sign that like life is short, you know what I mean? You need to really get on it to put it kind of cheesy, but whatever. Like it's absolutely true. He was, I don't even think he was 40 yet when he passed away, but like, I'm close to that age now. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I was just gonna say that. I mean, I feel like
Right.
that's pretty substantial, being where we're at in our age in this moment.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely think about that sometimes. So like that was a super formative moment. And a lot of that stuff happened at the same time. This was like, and so like music was and art was definitely an outlet in that situation too, when my father was sick and getting worse and worse. To just have a place where I can go to as like a teenage kid and lose my mind for a little while was good. It's healthy, I think. Same thing goes for BMX and skateboarding and all that stuff. It all sort of tied in, and gave me an outlet through what was really some pretty tragic stuff. So like, I feel like grateful that I had that, because I know people in similar situations that kind of didn't fare so well when they lost a loved one or whatever, because they didn't have that, to have an outlet that I can kind of rely on it, like I feel a lot of gratitude for that alone. But yeah, I don't know how far you want me to go with turning points, but there are a few more.
Keep going. I mean, take as much time as you want. I want to hear like all of it.
Yeah, well, let's see. I mean, moving to Miami was also obviously super formative, just getting out of southwestern Pennsylvania. And like, it wasn't even culture shock really, because I knew what it was going to be. I knew I was moving into like a cultural hub sort of. But just that taught me so much. And then like that city definitely has a lot more, I don't know if I want to say respect. They're a lot more aware of image, you know what I mean? And just how to hype things. So like bringing that back with me and to try to make it a little less icky, because it can be kind of icky down there. You know what I mean? But
I just came back from Vegas, so I understand what icky hype looks like.
Miami and Vegas, I've never been to Vegas, but I've heard it's pretty similar in a lot of ways. It doesn't have a beach, but in a lot of other, it's a city that
it's surrounded by a beach with no water.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's definitely one thing that I did bring back with me that was a good thing. A lot of skills and a lot of friendships and a lot of good stuff really. But as far as something that I could point to say that I know for sure Miami taught me, it's just how to hype like an event or something, and that's been a large part of my life at this point. So but yeah, and then moving back here, just reconnecting with your roots is also equally as important as leaving, I think. Not necessarily saying that everybody that moves away should move back, but in some way reconnecting with your roots is really kind of crucial to development, I think. And then I don't know, beyond that, I mean, once I started getting involved with music here again, I know it was probably the summer of 2012. I was working for the Art Institute, and I hated it. I hated that job. I was an admissions guy at the Art Institute. It was terrible. And they laid me off, and I clicked my heels out the front door and decided like I have this summer where I could really devote myself wholly to doing this stuff for the rest of my life. And it like kind of worked out. I mean, it took more time than that, and I had to do a lot of side jobs and wait tables and all that kind of stuff before I was actually working full time in live music again. But it did work. And I don't know that that would have happened without that summer. And yeah, I think that was the first year I went to Farm Jam Alabama too, which shout out to all the Farm Jam friends. Like that place was super crucial. It some of my best friends, a lot of the people that I ended up working with later, some of my best memories, all of it is tied back to that place, and I just love it. That was, also that summer. So like not one particular thing, but that summer was pivotal for sure.
I kind of love like that there. I have kind of like my own year, and I would say that probably around, it's probably the year that I went on tour, that Matt asked me to, like, hey, will you come out on tour with us? And there was just like so many things that changed in my life around that, like the amount of lessons learned, the amount, like what working hard really meant, like and kind of getting like that like glimpse of like, oh, this is the thing I want. Like, this is kind of like these are the, like, this life, this being able to travel, being able to see stuff, like I want to do a lot more of this, which is like kind of my whole ethos now, is like I almost don't really care a whole lot of what I do professionally, as long as it affords me the opportunity to like get out of Dodge and see more things. Like I have a whole list of places that I want to see. And but if I'm just going to vacation, I want to go to a beach.
Right.
But yeah, there's like those transformative moments, and they're elongated. Like you said, yours was an entire summer, and mine was about
and then some for sure. But
and mine was like 3 months plus being out, just on the road, like basically living like I was homeless for a minute. And but that's that little glimpse, and you're young enough to kind of be like, all right, I took this risk, but like I actually see like it. You have such a hard time like seeing like more than 10 feet in front of your face when you're younger. But then all of a sudden, when like that little path opens up and you see like for miles down the road, and you're like, oh shit, that I gotta go to that. I gotta go.
And I mean, from my view on your life, because like we sort of lost touch for a couple of years there. Like when I was in Florida, we may have spoken a few times here and there, but I didn't see you really until I moved back. And seeing how like you and Skip and everybody else like sort of really took it up to another level at that point. Like when I left, you were amateurs, and when I came back, you all were professionals. You know what I mean? Like it felt like, or at least had the professional drive. You know what I mean? Which is, maybe not the same thing, but I don't know. Either way,
we were hungry to be. It was
a noticeable difference, and I hoped that I carried some of that too. You know what I mean? I remember thinking that in the early Touch Faster days, that like, this is we're serious now.
Right.
God damn it.
Right. And actually mentioning Touch Faster, it kind of, that goes back to like, we literally put that together under the whole concept of like how like much we missed that community that was the music scene before, like that Laga days community. And we wanted that back so badly, and we were like, well, like if it's not gonna just come back, like let's try to build it back.
Right. And that's exactly that is exactly why we've all been friends for as long as we have, and exactly why why I mentioned earlier that the DIY ethos is so crucial. That's it right there. Like shit, nobody else is doing it, I guess we are then. Right. Rather than just like, oh well, I guess it doesn't happen. Like no, somebody has to. So if nobody else will, I guess we will. And I mean, I was so thrilled to come back and have somebody else that was thinking that way. You know what I mean? Like, because I was ready to go. I had just done like the first like couple of real shows that I had ever been a part of putting together with like multiple live music acts, and we did like a visual art element. This was all down in Florida. So like to be able to come back thinking like I wasn't expecting much. Like I said, Pittsburgh was dead when I left. It wasn't great, you know, or, you know, maybe shortly after there is where it kind of died off for a minute. But either way, like I wasn't expecting anything like that when I came back. So to immediately, like the week that I came back, Skip hit me up. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, we're doing this. Do you want in? Hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
And seriously, man, I like that was huge. I mean, yeah.
I don't know if I ever asked you.
Get off my couch. But being depressed, sad about being back home, and actually, you know, made me realize that there's stuff to do back home now. Like there's things happening here, or at least there could be. So, you know,
yeah,
hate that.
Yeah, there was definitely opportunity for sure. And like I said, like I don't think I've ever asked you like what actually took you down to Miami.
Man, I mean, if I'm being totally honest, like warm weather, beaches, bikinis, all that kind of stuff definitely played a part. I'm not gonna lie, I was 18. But I mean, a lot of it had to do with just I wanted to get far from home and experience something different. Like, not that I hated Pittsburgh or anything, but I just was ready to try something new out, and I wanted there to be an ocean nearby. So, you know, those were the two big things. But then I don't know how this even happened, but the school I went to sent like, you know, some mail to my house and like, come to South Florida, here's palm trees and stuff, you know, and I totally bit. I 100% bit. The school offered me like a decent scholarship because it was a private school. It wasn't, you know, a private school out of state. It was pricey, but they gave me a ton of money, and I was, you know, I asked my parents and they were both all about it. And they were, you know, my stepdad had moved away for college too. So I think like that kind of played a role. He knew that the positive experience of moving away for a while.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. It wasn't really like I was set on Miami though. That just sort of happened, you know. Again, you know, South Beach and all that kind of stuff, which I ended up hating South Beach is the funny part. And like I hung out in places that were like as far from South Beach as they could be, but that played a part in getting me down there, I think.
So just a little bit of marketing, and then all the other obvious things on top of it, weather, girls.
Yeah, well, dude, this is how it went.
Beach.
So I had chosen that school at that point. Like once they said they were going to give me money, I was like, well, I mean, this is a serious, you know, contender now. But my backup school was Edinburgh. No offense to anybody that went to Edinburgh, but I went up, I toured Edinburgh at like the beginning of March, and there was like 5 feet of snow everywhere, and like it was just awful. And then the very next week, me and my stepdad flew down to Miami to check out Barry, and it was
didn't
like
stand a chance.
This isn't even a contest. Are you serious? It's like they're gonna give me money and I get this over 5 feet of snow, and like nah. Plus, I think Edinburgh didn't have I was going for photo as my major, and Edinburgh had like it was sort of like you have a fine arts degree with like some sort of specification about photo. So it wasn't like directly a photo degree, and that also played like this much of a part.
Yeah, I actually remember that whole thing because I was going for like graphic design, which is still like a really early thing at the time. And not every college actually had the degree for it. So it was like some sort of like a mashup. Like you would be like you would be like in journalism with like a computer science degree or something like that. It was like this weird mashup of like,
hadn't figured it out yet, right?
Yeah, and I mean it kind of happened to me at Duquesne. Like I still ended up with a journalism degree. Like it was multimedia and journalism, but I mean that ended up playing out well in my favor because I found out that I actually really like writing, and I was doing so much blogging and stuff for a portion of my life. But yeah, so beyond Miami though, when did you actually make like the connect with the Rex? How did that all come to play? And then like, how did that develop the way that it did for you?
Well, I guess like in order to answer that, I'd have to give a little bit more of the Touch Faster backstory, you know. So like after you and Skip sort of left and I kept it going. So it was like a split between round 1 and round 2 Touch Faster. So once round 2 started, I brought in a few other friends to help, Brando and Rachel and like all those people. And we started doing events that were really similar to the ones that I did before I left Florida, where it was like 5 or 6 really good bands and a bunch of visual artists and live art, and like sort of just like a big party. I started doing a series of those here that were quarterly. So we did every solstice and equinox-ish. We weren't actually like picky pagans, so it wasn't always right on the actual day, but just somewhere around there. So I started doing those at Shadow Lounge, and then Shadow Lounge closed down. So we were scrambling for an event space, and we tried a few other spots that worked out terribly. And then we landed at the Rex, and it was like immediately, it was like, this is it. These are the people that I want to work with, you know? So we just did them there from then on. And then, you know, so I got to know everybody through that. And through Farm Jam, because it was a similar crowd. There was a lot of carryover between those crowds. So like, yeah. So yeah, basically after like a couple of years of doing that, the spot opened up where the Gray Area was hiring, and Ben hit me up and asked me if I was interested, and it was like immediately yes, like absolutely. You know, it was, again, back to what I was saying earlier, it's a music venue run by music nerds. It's the best kind of place you could ever work if you're a music nerd, you know what I mean? So like, yeah, it was yes, 100 times yes, let's go. Yeah, and I worked there that was starting in like 2014 through when it closed, or 2013, I don't remember, something like that. Yeah, probably 2014. Yeah, because there was like, again, a couple years that we did the Touch Faster parties and stuff. So yeah, around that, either way.
Right. Well, I mean, it was the funny part is like, you know, I said this earlier, you know, my living room is basically like a small museum of your artwork. But it was always so awesome to like walk by the Rex and like know that like it was so obvious that like the poster that you did, you know, like whatever, you know, whatever show poster you were designing, like I was like, it's definitely Pierce's.
Dude, I'm honestly, I'm really terrible at taking compliments, but my favorite compliment to get is definitely like, I saw this poster and I knew immediately that it was yours. And like, I love that more than anything, because like, I don't know, it tells me that I've got enough of a style that people recognize it, you know what I mean? And yeah, man,
you have
loved it too. I loved walking down Carson. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Right.
Like you have like it's like a thumbprint, you know what I mean? Like it's just like it's yours.
And it's strange too, because it's never something that I like consciously thought about. Like I never thought like, this is the style I want to, you know, like a lot of people, I was mimicking the artist that I liked, and it eventually just turned into something that was mine. But yeah, I don't know, hearing that definitely, it's awesome. You know, I loved it. And even now, without the Rex, I've had a few people say like, man, I miss seeing your posters all over the city. And I'm just like, I do too, man. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, there will be some stuff back around soon, but yeah,
we'll have to start just posting, like just come up with designs, and we'll just like just start like posting you around like just guerrilla style.
Hey, I'm with it. That was, street art was a big part of that culture that we grew up into. I'm not going to admit to anything because I don't know how long the statute of limitations is. Good times.
Right on. Well, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground already. So like, what does the future of Pierce Marratto hold? Like any secrets that you're holding, like you're keeping close to the vest, and maybe you're ready released into the world here, or what?
Actually, yeah. In the immediate future, Art Basel in Florida is the first week of December, And we just confirmed that Joanne and I, my fiance, that's other big news, is that I got engaged recently. But
and congratulations again, sir.
Thank you. We're going down for Art Basel this year, and I'm going to be displaying some of the skateboard decks via my buddy's gallery. It's called End to End Gallery at Scope Miami, and a couple other places that I'll be posting about in the next few days. So like, I don't know if you've heard of Art Basel, or if, listeners have heard of Art Basel, but it's basically Miami turns into the art capital of the world for 4 days, and it's insane. And all the big artists are doing, walls in Wynwood, and all the galleries have big openings, and it's wild and it's amazing. And I haven't taken part in it as an artist since like 2007, probably. I'm going to be showing a couple of my decks there this year, though. So I'm super pumped about that. And super pumped to get out of Pittsburgh's gray, cold weather for a few days.
Well, we might need to talk, because the girl that I had on last year, right before, what is this, 2021? It was the last podcast I did for 2020. Her name is Oriana. And she's in it as well, and she and I have been in contact, and I'm trying to get down there to
do it.
See. So if you're going to be down there, we might need to talk.
Yeah, and back to Red Fishbowl too. They're going to be bringing down this bust that they have. I don't know who actually owns it, but it's connected to them somehow, and it's got this amazing painting on the side of it. They're driving this bus filled with art down there and doing some like guerrilla style stuff too. So they're going to be represented. I don't know. I'm going to try to meet up with them, but it's going to be a crazy week already. So we'll see. But if you have the ability to, and you got a reason to go down, you should. It really is pretty cool. And like, even just for the fact that you can walk around certain parts of the city, and it's just like there's really famous, amazing artists painting walls right in front of you, and it's super cool to see. A little bit of rich hoity-toity people, the collectors and stuff, though, but I guess it's all part of what keeps the machine moving, I suppose. So whatever, let it go. But it's a pretty cool thing. So I'm pumped that we're going back for it.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, hang on after we're done here, because we're going to have to talk a little bit here.
For sure.
Now that's the thing that you're dropping on.
Right.
Jesus Christ. So at the end of all of these things, I let the interviewee become the interviewer. So, well, I guess you could ask me something, but I really just have you ask the listeners a question, like anything that you'd want to know from the audience. This is like your opportunity to kind of like poll the public, and what do you want to know from the public?
So I like ask a question, and then when this airs, it'll be like in the comments and stuff.
They can just pump it down in the comments. And I'll clip it and I'll send it out again.
I guess, what else other than skateboards, now that I've not that project's completed, because it's going to be ongoing still, but now that I've sort of got the show handled and that's out of the way, what else people would like to see me put my art on? I want to get into doing a lot more merchandise stuff, and like kind of things that people can buy when they don't have $1,000 to spend on a painting or whatever, so like t-shirts and clothing items or stuff like that. What else would people like to see me put my art on? That's definitely something that I'd like to hear from the crowd on. I don't know if I have anything beyond that, to be honest.
I mean, that's good enough. I mean, there's been people that asked about Netflix suggestions. So, I mean, it's literally dealer's
I wasn't
choice.
thinking big enough, I guess. How can I make $1 million really quickly?
How can I make my first million?
Right. Still working on that one. I don't know. I think that's the only question I have immediately coming to mind, though. I would take Netflix suggestions, though. That's always welcome.
Yeah, I think the whole thing would be like Squid Game.
Right. I haven't watched that yet, actually. So maybe I should. I don't know.
If you would watch it, would you watch it dubbed or subbed?
Well, it depends. I would definitely prefer subtitles over overdubs, but sometimes I watch movies while I'm drawing or painting, so I have to, I can't read subtitles,
Right.
So it would depend how or when I was watching it. But yeah, if I'm just like chilling on the couch watching it, then subtitles for sure.
Yeah, I go dubbed just because I just don't want an extra chore on top of the whole thing.
I mean, I definitely do that too sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes things are lost in translation, you know what I
For
mean?
sure.
And especially, I don't know, I went on a kick for a while where I got into South Korean movies. So there was a stretch that there was really good movies coming out of that part of the world. And I don't know, some of the way that they would say things when you read it, I don't know. It's just weird. But yeah, sometimes I'm lazy too, though. I feel you.
All right, man. Well, so lastly, we're just gonna do the whole thing. Replug the show, tell people where they can reach you, your website, social media, all the things.
Cool. Yeah. The show this Saturday at Red Fishbowl, November 20th, that is. The show's from 7 to 10. It's free. There is an online reservation form that if you fill that out, then you're put into a contest to win a free deck. So we could link to that or something, maybe.
Put it in the show notes here.
What's that?
I'll put it in the show notes.
Perfect. So, and then you can find me on social media. I'm at Pierce Marratto on Instagram and Twitter, at Marratto Artwork on Facebook, and my website is marrattoart.work, and that links to my shop too, which, that's a good thing to mention. After the show, after the opening this weekend, all the skateboards will be listed in my online store. So if people can't make the show and want to buy a deck, they're all available in there. So that won't be until Sunday, Monday, probably, but next week. Yeah, I think I covered it all, right?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Well, man, I'm super excited for you. I love that this is something that you've been wanting to do since you were in high school, and finally, you're at least going to put out version 1.0. So I mean, congratulations are definitely in order. And I wouldn't hang your pieces on my wall if I wasn't really into what you do. I
get that, man.
I'm very genuine when I say that I love the work that you do, and
thank you.
I don't think that you're going to have many decks left over. So congratulations.
Thank
and
you.
I'm glad that we finally did this, because we've been talking about it for easily close to a
I
year
know.
now.
We really have, and I'm glad we did too. And I'm down to come back on again in the future for another event or for fun. Either way, it was a good time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know. You have yourself a good one, and then we'll I don't know. I'm not gonna even say good luck on the show, because I know it's gonna kill. So I mean, just have fun, I guess.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And if you can't make it out, I appreciate all the help and everything over the years, being a friend and a fan and all that. So thanks again, man. Much love.
Absolutely. Definitely a friend and a fan.
And I guess I'll stay on and we'll talk about Basil.
We are. See you, buddy.
Bye.